Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. This video is provided strictly for educational and entertainment purposes and does not constitute professional legal, financial, tax, or real estate advice. Real estate transactions involving divorce are complex legal matters that vary significantly by state jurisdiction and individual circumstances. The potential outcomes discussed are based on historical trends and general market data, available as of 2026. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult with a licensed attorney, a certified financial planner, or a qualified tax professional before making any decisions regarding marital assets, mortgage obligations, or property listings. The creators of this content are not responsible for any actions taken based on the information provided herein. Every 13 seconds in America, a judge signs a decree that effectively detonates a family's largest financial asset. We are currently witnessing a phenomenon that social scientists and market analysts are calling the Great Marital Uncoupling of the mid-2020s. In 2026, over 830,000 divorces will be finalized in the United States, and historical trends indicate that roughly 70% of those cases involve real property. That is over 581,000 homes entering the market under the most high-stakes, emotionally volatile conditions imaginable. But here is the shocking statistic that nobody in the industry wants to talk about. The vast majority of real estate agents are completely unequipped to handle these sales. In fact, a standard top producer, who handles luxury listings or first-time buyers, is often the very reason a divorce settlement ends up in a multi-year litigation nightmare. We are at a cultural tipping point where the generalist real estate agent is becoming a liability in the American courtroom. Today we are diving into why a new breed of professional, the divorce real estate expert, is the only thing standing between a couple's fresh start and their total financial collapse. If you are a homeowner, a real estate professional, or someone navigating a split right now, this deep dive masterclass solves the single biggest problem in the 2026 housing market. How to liquidate a shared asset when the owners are at war, the interest rates are locked at 2021 lows, and the legal system is watching every move. The landscape of American divorce has undergone a radical transformation over the last decade. To understand the rise of the specialized divorce agent, we first have to look at the gray divorce explosion. While divorce rates for younger generations have actually stabilized or even declined, the rate for Americans over the age of 50 has doubled since 1990. For those over 65, it has tripled. This is the silver tsunami of the family court system. Plus one. When a couple in their 30s divorces, they are often fighting over a starter home with 10% equity. But when a couple in their 60s decides to part ways after 30 years of marriage, they are liquidating a primary residence, perhaps a vacation home, and decades of accumulated net worth tied into the local real estate market. In 2026, the complexity of these transactions is compounded by the mortgage rate lock-in effect. Feature traditional real estate agent divorce real estate specialist, CDRE. Primary goal: highest price and shortest time, preservation of equity and legal neutrality. Communication direct with the clients as a unit, separate, documented communication with both. Courtroom presence rare / avoid subpoenas prepared for depositions and expert testimony. Conflict resolution, persuasion and sales tactics, mediation-based negotiation and boundaries. Legal knowledge, basic contract law, understanding of lease pendants, orders of sale, export to sheets. According to 2026 mortgage industry data, approximately 80% of U.S. homeowners currently hold an interest rate below 6%. For a divorcing couple, this creates a financial prison. If they sell the family home where they have a 3% mortgage, neither spouse can afford to buy a replacement property at the current 2026 market rates of 6.5% with the same monthly payment. This economic reality has shifted the cultural narrative from "I want out" to "How do we survive the exit?" This is where the traditional real estate model fails. A standard agent's job is to sell the dream. They bring fresh flowers, bake cookies for the open house, and try to get both parties to agree on a paint color. In a high-conflict divorce, that approach is like bringing a toothpick to a gunfight. The divorce real estate specialist operates more like a court-appointed receiver. Their role is not just to sell a house. It is to mitigate the risk of wasteful dissipation of marital assets. Consider a historical case study from the 2024 to 2025 transition period. A couple in a high-conflict scenario was ordered by the court to sell their $800,000 home. They hired a friend of the family agent. One spouse refused to sign the listing agreement. The other spouse refused to allow showings on Tuesdays. The agent, trying to be nice, took sides in an email, which was then subpoenaed by the opposing counsel. The result? The house sat on the market for 9 months, the equity was eaten up by legal fees, and the agent was forced to testify in a deposition they weren't prepared for. In 2026, the divorce real estate expert uses a step-by-step framework to prevent this. Step 1. The neutrality protocol. The specialist never meets with both spouses at the same time if there is an active restraining order or high-level conflict. They use mirrored communication, sending the exact same email at the exact same time to both parties and their respective attorneys. This eliminates the he said, she said dynamic that destroys most sales. Step 2. The data-driven valuation. In a standard sale, the agent wants the highest price. In a divorce, one spouse might actually want a lower valuation if they are trying to buy the other person out. The specialist must provide a fair market value that can stand up to cross-examination in a 2026 courtroom. This involves a deep dive into hyperlocal trends, absorption rates, and as-is versus improved value. The cultural shift we are seeing is a move toward precision real estate. The American consumer in 2026 is more skeptical and more legally savvy than ever before. They realize that the family home is not just a building. It is a complex financial instrument. Furthermore, the rise of platonic co-parenting models and nesting, where the children stay in the home and the parents rotate in and out, has created a demand for agents who understand specialized occupancy agreements. The 2026 agent must be part therapist, part paralegal, and part master negotiator. As we move through this 10-part deep dive, we will explore the specific matrimonial home traps that are catching sellers off guard this year. We will look at the exact language that needs to be in a 2026 court order to ensure a house actually gets sold, and we will break down the tax implications of the Section 121 exclusion in a post-2025 tax environment. The goal of this masterclass is to move you from the chaos of a standard transaction into the certainty of a specialized sale. Because in 2026, when the ink is dry on the divorce papers, the only thing that matters is how much of your hard-earned equity actually makes it into your new bank account. Historical trends show that those who use specialized representation retain up to 15% more of their equity compared to those who use generalist agents. The stakes have never been higher, and the margin for error has never been thinner. Welcome to the new reality of American real estate. To understand why the divorce real estate agent is the most critical player in the 2026 economy, we have to look at the math of the golden handcuffs. Imagine if you bought a home in 2021 for $600,000 with a 2.8% interest rate. Your principal and interest payment is roughly $2,465 per month. Fast forward to today in 2026. Your marriage is ending. You look at the market and realize that to buy a similar home at today's 6.7% rate, that same monthly payment only buys you a $380,000 property. You are effectively being priced out of your own life by your own divorce. This creates what sociologists call the housing hostage crisis. In previous decades, divorce was a catalyst for 2 new home purchases. Today, it is more often a catalyst for 1 sale and 2 people moving back into rentals or their parents' basements. This shifts the entire psychology of the transaction from a move-up opportunity to a loss mitigation exercise. Let us look at a case study that reflects current 2026 historical trends. Meet Robert and Linda, a couple in Charlotte, North Carolina. They have $400,000 in equity in a suburban home. Robert wants to liquidate everything and move to a smaller town. Linda wants to stay in the school district, but she cannot qualify for a refinance on her own because her debt-to-income ratio is skewed by the car payments and the sudden loss of Robert's income in the household calculation. They hire a top-selling neighborhood agent. Let us call her Jennifer. Jennifer is great at staging and digital marketing, but she has no training in the nuances of the 2026 legal landscape regarding the sale of a primary residence during a separation. Jennifer treats them like a happy couple. She sends group texts. She asks them to agree on the listing price over a conference call. Within 3 days, the communication breaks down. Robert feels Jennifer is siding with Linda because Linda is the one who answers the door for the stager. Linda feels Robert is being aggressive because he wants to list the house low for a quick sale. Jennifer, the generalist agent, is now caught in the middle of a legal firestorm. She does not realize that Robert has filed a lease pendens, a formal notice of a pending legal action regarding the property title. Because she did not check the updated title report, she markets the home, finds a buyer, and moves toward a closing that is legally impossible to finish. This is not just a failed sale. It is a potential outcome that leads to thousands of dollars in wasted inspection fees, appraisal costs, and potential lawsuits from the frustrated buyers. In 2026, the specialized divorce real estate agent enters the scene with a completely different operating system. They do not use group texts. They use secure, transparent communication portals where every interaction is timestamped and can be exported for a judge to review. They understand that in a divorce, the house is not just a home. It is a court-ordered liquidation. One of the biggest cultural shifts we are seeing in 2026 is the rise of the stay-in-house agreement, often referred to as a deferred sale. Imagine a scenario where the court allows one spouse to remain in the home for 2 years, until the youngest child graduates high school. This sounds like a compassionate solution, but it is a financial minefield. Who pays for the roof leak in 2027? Who gets the tax deduction for the mortgage interest in 2026? If the spouse in the house stops paying the mortgage, how does the other spouse protect their credit score? The divorce specialist agent works with the attorneys to draft a sales stipulation before the house even hits the market. This document is a step-by-step manual for the transaction. It dictates who chooses the paint colors, who pays for the pre-listing repairs, and exactly how much the price will be reduced every 30 days if the home does not sell. By removing the need for the ex-spouses to make decisions together, the agent removes the conflict. The data from the first half of 2026 shows that homes listed by divorce specialists often sell faster than those listed by generalist agents in similar conflict scenarios. The reason is simple: certainty. Buyers in 2026 are wary. When they see a house that looks like a divorce sale, half-empty closets, tension in the air, a sign that has been up for 60 days, they get nervous. They worry about an uncooperative seller who will refuse to sign the closing documents at the last minute. A specialized agent brands the listing differently. They ensure the home is presented as a neutral, ready-to-move-in asset. They handle the right of first refusal conversations where one spouse has the option to match an outside offer. This is a highly technical maneuver. If a buyer submits an offer of $750,000, and the wife has a right of first refusal, the agent must navigate the timeline perfectly so the outside buyer does not feel like they are being used as a stalking horse to set a price for the internal buyout. Furthermore, we have to talk about the 2026 shadow inventory of divorce. There are thousands of homes currently held by couples who are separated but feel they cannot afford to divorce because of the real estate implications. They are living separately under one roof. This cultural shift has led to an explosion in demand for accessory dwelling units or ADUs. In many U.S. states, we are seeing couples spend $100,000 to build a tiny home in the backyard, just so they can divorce without losing their 3% mortgage rate on the main house. But what happens when the backyard solution is not enough? What happens when the emotional toll outweighs the financial benefit of the low interest rate? This is where the divorce real estate agent becomes a transition manager. They are not just selling a property. They are facilitating the dissolution of a partnership. Step 1 for a specialized agent in 2026 is always the title search and liens investigation. You would be surprised how many homeowners in 2026 have zombie liens or helix that one spouse tapped into without the other's full knowledge. In a standard sale, these come out 5 days before closing. In a divorce sale, the specialist identifies them on day 1. Step 2 is the occupancy plan. In 2026, with the high cost of moving, the specialist must coordinate where both parties are going. If one spouse cannot find a rental because of a recent credit dip during the separation, they might refuse to leave the house, which stalls the closing. The divorce agent often has a network of divorce-friendly landlords and short-term housing providers to ensure the pipeline stays moving. Step 3 is the repair protocol. We are seeing a trend in 2026 where property neglect is becoming a legitimate concern. If one spouse feels they are being forced out, they might neglect the property or stop basic maintenance. The specialist agent performs regular walkthroughs and uses high-resolution photo documentation to preserve the state of the asset. This is not about being a spy, but about protecting the equity for both parties. The 2026 landscape also involves a deep understanding of tax implications. If a couple decides to turn their home into a rental to keep the mortgage rate, but they are no longer speaking, who manages the property? The rise of divorce-neutral property management is a subsector of the industry that barely existed 5 years ago. As we peel back the layers of this cultural shift, we have to look at the darker side of the equation. What happens when the house is underwater? Even in 2026, with generally high values, some markets that overextended in 2023 and 2024 are seeing corrections. If a couple owes $550,000 and the house is worth $525,000, the divorce agent must navigate a short sale while simultaneously managing a custody battle. This is where the educational tone of a specialist is vital. They have to explain to two people who are in conflict that they both need to bring $15,000 to the closing table just to be rid of the property in each other. This leads us to the most controversial part of the 2026 real estate world: the secret sale. More and more high-net-worth couples are opting for off-market listings to keep their private business out of the local gossip mill and away from prying eyes on public real estate sites. But does this limit the potential outcomes for the final sale price? The evolution of the divorce real estate agent is a direct response to a more litigious, more expensive, and more complex American society. In the next part, we are going to look at the 3 deadly documents that can override your listing agreement. If you think your agent is in charge of your home sale, wait until you see what a lease pendens, a special master appointment, and a marital settlement agreement can do to your plans. We will also reveal why the appraisal gap in 2026 is causing more divorces to end up back in court than at the closing table. Stay tuned as we dive into the legal triggers that every homeowner needs to know before they say it is over. The legal triggers that can halt a real estate transaction in 2026 are often invisible to the naked eye until it is too late. For most homeowners, the process of selling a house is a linear path: list, show, offer, close. But in a divorce scenario, that path is littered with landmines known as the 3 deadly documents. Understanding these is not just a legal necessity. It is a prerequisite for preserving your financial future in the current American economy. The first of these documents is the lease pendens. This is a Latin term meaning suit pending, and in 2026, it has become the ultimate kill switch for property sales. Imagine a scenario with Michael and Sarah in Denver. They own a high-equity modern farmhouse. Sarah wants to sell and move to the coast, but Michael believes the market will peak in 6 months and refuses to sign the listing agreement. In a standard real estate world, this is just a stalemate. But in a divorce world, Sarah's attorney files a lease pendens. This notice is recorded with the county clerk and becomes a public cloud on the title. In the hyper-connected digital landscape of 2026, a lease pendens shows up instantly on every title search and even some consumer-facing real estate platforms. For a potential buyer, this is a massive red flag. No bank in the United States will issue a mortgage for a property with an active lease pendens because the ownership is legally disputed. If an agent who is not a divorce specialist lists this home, they might find a buyer and get all the way to the title search phase, only to have the entire deal collapse 72 hours before closing. This leads to potential outcomes where the sellers are sued by the buyers for failing to disclose a known title defect. A specialized divorce agent knows to check for this document before a single photo is taken, working with the attorneys to have a release of lease pendens ready to be filed simultaneously with the sale. The second document is the marital settlement agreement, or the MSA. In 2026, we are seeing a historical trend of poorly drafted MSAs that treat real estate as a secondary thought. Imagine if your divorce decree says the house must be sold for no less than $850,000, and the proceeds split 50/50. This sounds simple, but what if the 2026 market shifts and the highest offer is $840,000? Without specific language addressing price reductions, the couple is forced back into court to get a judge's permission to accept the lower offer. This can take 3 to 4 months in a backlogged 2026 court system, by which time the buyer has walked away and the house has become a stale listing. A divorce real estate specialist reviews the MSA with a different lens. They look for the real estate rider, which should ideally detail the timeline for listing, the person responsible for choosing the agent, the specific protocol for handling low offers, and a clear definition of what constitutes a reasonable repair request from a buyer. Without these details, the house becomes a weapon. If Michael is angry about the alimony settlement, he might refuse to fix a broken water heater during the inspection period just to spite Sarah, knowing it will kill the deal and keep her stuck in the marriage longer. The third and perhaps most powerful document is the order of sale, or the appointment of a special master. This is the nuclear option of 2026 real estate. When a judge realizes that a couple is incapable of cooperating to sell the asset, they can strip the owners of their right to control the sale. The court appoints a special master, often an attorney or a high-level specialist agent, who has the legal authority to sign the listing agreement and the closing documents on behalf of the spouses. In this scenario, the homeowners lose their voice entirely. They cannot choose the price, they cannot choose the buyer, and they certainly cannot choose the agent. This leads us to the most volatile conflict of 2026, the appraisal gap. In a high-interest rate environment where inventory is fluctuating, valuing a home has become an art rather than a science. Let us look at a case study involving David and Emily in Phoenix. Emily wants to buy David out of his share of the home. To do this, she needs to know the value. Emily hires an appraiser who, knowing she is the one paying for the report, leans toward the lower end of the spectrum, valuing the home at $700,000. David, feeling suspicious, hires his own appraiser who uses different comparable sales and values the home at $790,000. In a 2026 courtroom, this $90,000 discrepancy is a catastrophe. It leads to what is known as the battle of the experts. Each spouse spends $5,000 to $10,000 on expert witness fees to have their appraiser testify. The judge, who is not a real estate expert, is often left to simply split the difference or order a third, neutral appraisal. This is why a divorce real estate agent provides a court-ready market analysis. This is not a standard CMA. It is a 40-page dossier that includes hyperlocal data, absorption rates, and a detailed adjustment grid that mirrors the standards of a forensic appraisal. It is designed to be so comprehensive that it prevents the need for litigation by providing a number that both legal teams can agree is irrefutable. The steps to navigating this 2026 landscape require a shift in perspective. First, you must conduct a title audit. Most people assume their title is clean, but in a divorce we often find zombie liens, home equity lines of credit that were thought to be closed but still have a $10 balance, or IRS liens triggered by one spouse's business taxes. Second, you must establish an occupancy protocol. If one spouse has already moved out, who is responsible for the lawn? If the spouse remaining in the home is quietly sabotaging showings by leaving laundry on the floor or the dog barking in the crate, how is that documented? Historical trends show that in 2026, the psychological state of the out spouse is often overlooked. The person who has moved into a small apartment while the other person stays in the 4,000 square foot mansion is often the one who becomes the most aggressive during the sale process. They want the money fast. The in spouse often wants the process to move slowly, because the day the house sells is the day they have to face the reality of their new life. A specialized agent manages these conflicting timelines with the precision of a project manager. Furthermore, we are seeing a massive cultural shift in how property is presented. In the past, you would hide the fact that a divorce was happening. In 2026, transparency with the buyer's agent is often a strategic advantage. A divorce specialist might say to a buyer's agent, "This is a court-ordered sale. My clients are represented by counsel, and we have a signed sale stipulation. This transaction is moving forward regardless of any personal conflict." This creates a sense of security for the buyer, letting them know that the divorce drama will not stop them from getting the keys. As we look at these legal and financial hurdles, we have to consider the environment inside the home itself. In 2026, technology has added a new layer of complexity to the divorce sale that we are only beginning to understand. From smart doorbells that record every conversation between the agent and a potential buyer, to hidden nanny cams used to spy on an ex-spouse during their weekend in the house, the family home has become a surveillance state. How do you protect the sale when your every word is being recorded by the other party? And what happens when a spouse uses the smart home system to turn off the heat or lock the doors during a scheduled showing? In the next part, we are going to dive into the digital warfare of 2026 divorce real estate. We will show you how to sanitize a smart home for sale and the legal consequences of digital stalking during a listing. You will not believe the data on how many sales are blown by a Ring doorbell notification sent to a disgruntled ex. Stay with us as we expose the hidden tech traps of the modern divorce sale. The family home of 2026 is no longer just a collection of rooms. It is a complex web of interconnected devices that capture, store, and transmit data. When a marriage dissolves, this smart infrastructure frequently becomes a weapon of digital psychological warfare. In high-conflict divorces, the house itself can be used to spy, harass, and sabotage the very sale that both parties supposedly need to move forward. This phenomenon has become so prevalent in 2026 that specialized divorce real estate agents now include a digital sweep as part of their standard listing protocol. Let us look at a case study involving Jason and Melissa in Austin, Texas, a city known for its tech-forward residential real estate. They owned a $1.2 million smart home equipped with integrated lighting, climate control, and a whole-house security system. Melissa had already moved into a rental, while Jason remained in the marital home. From his smartphone, Jason had total control over every aspect of the property's environment. When the real estate agent scheduled a showing, Jason's phone would receive a notification the moment the agent's digital key opened the front door. Jason would wait until the potential buyers reached the living room. Then he would use the smart home app to turn off the air conditioning in the 100-degree Austin heat. He would dim the lights to 10%, making the home feel dark and uninviting. On one occasion, when he saw via the indoor cameras that the buyers were particularly interested in the kitchen, he activated the smart oven to start a self-cleaning cycle, which emitted a high heat odor throughout the house. This is not just a story about a difficult seller. It is a case study in the modern dissipation of assets. By the time a specialized divorce real estate agent was brought in to replace the generalist who could not figure out why every buyer left the house feeling uncomfortable, the home had been on the market for 120 days. Historical trends in 2026 indicate that homes with active digital interference sit on the market 45% longer and eventually sell for 12 to 18% less than comparable properties. The legal implications of this digital warfare are staggering and often misunderstood by homeowners. In many U.S. jurisdictions in 2026, the use of smart home devices to record audio of potential buyers and their agents without consent is a violation of wiretapping laws. If Jason used his smart speaker to listen to the private conversation between the buyer and the agent, he was potentially committing a felony, depending on whether the state follows one-party or two-party consent rules. Furthermore, the act of intentionally sabotaging a sale through tech can be viewed by a judge as a breach of fiduciary duty to the marital estate, leading to potential outcomes where the sabotaging spouse is ordered to pay the difference in the final sale price out of their share of the equity. Step 1 in the 2026 digital sanitization process is the device audit. A specialized agent will walk through the home with a checklist, identifying every smart device from the obvious ones like the video doorbell to the obscure ones like smart light bulbs and connected refrigerators. In high-conflict cases, the specialist will recommend a factory reset of the main hub and the creation of a neutral, agent-managed account for the duration of the listing. This ensures that neither spouse can remotely alter the home's environment during a showing. Step 2 involves the Wi-Fi. We have seen historical trends where the spouse who moves out intentionally changes the Wi-Fi password or cancels the service entirely, which breaks the smart locks and leaves the house vulnerable or inaccessible. The 2026 divorce specialist often brings in a temporary, independent mobile hotspot to keep the essential smart features like the thermostat and the security cameras operational and neutral. Exterior cameras are maintained for safety, but interior cameras are typically disabled or covered to protect the privacy of the occupants and the buyers. Step 3 is the surveillance disclosure. In the 2026 real estate market, transparency is the only defense against litigation. A specialized agent will place a formal disclosure in the entryway of the home, stating clearly that the home is a smart home, and that while audio recording is disabled, exterior video surveillance is active. This protects the sellers from claims of privacy violations and sets a professional tone for the transaction. Imagine if the roles were reversed. Imagine you are the buyer walking into a home where the Wi-Fi network name is something disparaging about the other spouse. This is a real occurrence in 2026. Buyers are looking for a fresh start, and the moment they sense a digital battleground, they flee. They do not want to buy into a lawsuit, and they certainly do not want to buy a house where the previous owner might still have digital access to the front door lock 6 months after closing. The technical evolution of the divorce real estate agent has reached a point where they must act as a digital forensics liaison. They work with IT professionals to ensure that all digital handshakes are severed. This means removing the property from the spouse's smart home accounts. It means ensuring the smart garage door opener no longer pings an ex-spouse's phone every time the door opens. Another critical area of concern is the smart irrigation system. In 2026, many U.S. states have strict water conservation laws. We have seen case studies where a disgruntled spouse set the smart sprinklers to run for 24 hours straight, leading to a $2,000 water bill and a fine from the city, effectively draining equity from the sale. A divorce specialist monitors these utility patterns as closely as they monitor the feedback from showings. We also have to consider the data that stays with the house. In 2026, a smart fridge might have a family calendar or photos stored in its memory. A specialized agent ensures that this personal data is wiped before the first open house. This is about more than just privacy. It is about removing the emotional artifacts that remind buyers they are standing in the middle of a broken home. The cost of this digital warfare is not just measured in lower sale prices. It is measured in the skyrocketing legal fees that occur when the sale of the house becomes a multi-month investigation into who changed the password on the thermostat. In 2026, judges are increasingly losing patience with these tech-based antics. We are seeing more court orders that specifically forbid either party from accessing the home's digital systems once the listing agreement is signed. As we continue this masterclass, the complexity only deepens. While digital warfare is an immediate threat to the listing, there is an even larger financial iceberg looming under the surface of the 2026 housing market. It is the secret that everyone with a 3% mortgage is trying to figure out: how to keep the rate while losing the spouse. The 2026 real estate specialist must navigate the incredibly narrow path of mortgage assumptions and novations. In the next part, we are going to reveal why most banks tell you that you cannot take over your ex-spouse's mortgage, and why they are often wrong. We will break down the exact paperwork required to perform a mortgage assumption in 2026, and how this single maneuver can save a divorcing individual over $2,000 a month in interest payments. If you thought the house had to be sold to settle the debt, you might be surprised by what the federal guidelines actually allow. We will explore the hidden language in the Garnes-T-Germain Act that changes everything for a 2026 divorce settlement. Stay with us as we unlock the secrets of the mortgage assumption. In the financial landscape of 2026, the single most valuable asset in a divorce is often not the house itself, but the piece of paper attached to it, the 2021-era mortgage. We are currently living through a period where a 3% interest rate is a generational anomaly, a unicorn that most people will never see again in their lifetimes. When a couple divorces today, the bank's first instinct is to tell them they must sell the home or refinance the debt to remove one spouse's name. In the eyes of the lender, a refinance is a win because it forces the remaining spouse into a 2026 market rate of nearly 7%, effectively doubling their interest expense and increasing the bank's profit margin. However, the specialized divorce real estate agent knows a secret that the average consumer, and even many generalist agents, completely misses. That secret is rooted in a 1982 piece of federal legislation called the Garnes-T-Germain Depository Institutions Act. To understand why this matters, let us look at a case study involving Mark and Elena in Seattle. In 2021, they bought a home for $800,000 with a $600,000 mortgage at 3.1%. Their monthly principal and interest payment was approximately $2,563. By 2026, their marriage has reached its end. The home is now valued at $1,050,000. Elena wants to keep the house to provide stability for their 2 children. If Elena were forced to refinance that $600,000 debt at today's 6.8% rate, her payment would jump to roughly $3,912. That is an extra $1,349 every single month, or over $16,000 a year in additional interest alone. For a single mother in 2026, that is the difference between financial stability and insolvency. When Elena calls her mortgage servicer, the customer service representative likely tells her that her conventional loan is non-assumable. Historically, only FHA, VA, and USDA loans are officially marketed as assumable. But the Garnes-T-Germain Act provides a powerful federal shield that overrides the standard due-on-sale clause found in almost every mortgage contract in America. The Act states that a lender may not exercise its option pursuant to a due-on-sale clause upon a transfer where a spouse becomes an owner of the property, or a transfer resulting from a decree of a dissolution of marriage, legal separation agreement, or from an incidental property settlement agreement. In plain English, this means the bank cannot call the loan due just because Mark is transferring his interest to Elena as part of the divorce. However, there is a massive catch that 2026 homeowners often overlook: the difference between a transfer of title and a release of liability. While Elena can legally take the title to the house without triggering a sale, Mark's name remains on the mortgage note. If Elena misses a payment in 2027, Mark's credit score is decimated. If Mark wants to buy a new home for himself in 2026, the bank will count the entire $600,000 debt against his debt-to-income ratio, likely preventing him from qualifying for a new loan. This is where the specialized divorce real estate agent facilitates a process known as a qualified assumption or a novation. Step 1 in this 2026 framework is the initial feasibility study. The agent works with a divorce lending specialist to determine if Elena can actually qualify for the $2,563 payment on her own income. lenders will still require the remaining spouse to meet credit and income requirements to take over the loan entirely. Historical trends show that many assumptions fail because the remaining spouse waits until after the divorce is final to start the process, only to realize their debt-to-income ratio does not work without the other spouse's salary. Step 2 involves the equity buyout. This is the biggest hurdle in the 2026 housing market. If the house is worth $1,050,000 and the loan is $600,000, there is $450,000 in equity. Mark is entitled to $225,000 of that. If Elena keeps the 3% mortgage, she still has to find a way to give Mark his $225,000. In 2021, she would have simply done a cash-out refinance. In 2026, doing a cash-out refinance would destroy the low interest rate. The specialized agent explores potential outcomes involving secondary financing. In 2026, we are seeing a surge in home equity lines of credit or HELOCs used as a bridge. Elena might take out a HELOC for the $225,000 at a higher variable rate to pay Mark off, while keeping the primary $600,000 loan at 3%. The blended rate of the two loans is still significantly lower than a total refinance at 7%. This is a complex financial maneuver that requires the agent to coordinate with the attorneys to ensure the marital settlement agreement is worded with surgical precision. If the decree simply says Elena must refinance, she loses her garnissage germain protections. It must specifically state that she is to receive the property as her sole and separate residence, and that the parties will pursue an assumption or novation. Step 3 is the battle with the servicer. In 2026, mortgage servicers are notoriously difficult to work with regarding assumptions because they make no money on them. They often lose money because they are stuck holding a low-interest loan in a high-interest environment. A standard real estate agent would have no idea how to navigate the internal loss mitigation department of a major bank. The divorce specialist, however, knows how to escalate the file to the office of the president at the lending institution, citing the specific federal guidelines that protect divorcing homeowners. Imagine the emotional weight lifted from a family when they realize they do not have to uproot their lives just because the bank said no on the first phone call. But we must also look at the risks. If the assumption process takes 6 months, which is a common historical trend in 2026, and Mark wants to buy a new house immediately, he is in a state of financial limbo. The divorce agent must manage the expectations of both parties, often acting as a mediator between the departing spouse's need for freedom and the staying spouse's need for stability. There is also the phenomenon of the underwater assumption. While rare in 2026, some regional markets that saw a massive bubble in 2024 are seeing slight price corrections. If a couple owes more than the house is worth, an assumption might be the only way to avoid a short sale. The bank might be more willing to allow a spouse to take over the loan if it means avoiding a default on their books. The cultural shift here is a move away from the clean break mentality. In the 1990s and 2000s, divorce almost always meant selling the house and moving on. In 2026, the sheer cost of housing has made the clean break a luxury that few can afford. We are seeing more creative, long-term financial ties between ex-spouses than ever before. This leads to a new level of complexity in the 2026 real estate market: the rise of the divorce-induced co-ownership. But what happens when the math doesn't work? What happens when Elena cannot qualify for the HELOC to buy out Mark? Or when the bank flatly refuses to release Mark from liability despite the garnissage germain protections? This is when the transaction moves from a financial strategy to a tactical sale. And in 2026, selling a house during a divorce requires a level of staging that goes far beyond furniture and paint. It requires the sanitization of the marital narrative. In the next part, we are going to look at the psychology of the buyer. We will explore why 2026 buyers are terrified of divorce sales, and how a specialized agent uses neutrality staging to hide the conflict and drive up the price. We will also reveal the listing language that accidentally signals to buyers that you are desperate to sell, and how to fix it. If you think the his and hers closets don't matter, wait until you see the data on how much money is left on the table when a buyer smells a courtroom battle. The next chapter of this deep dive will show you how to turn a tragedy into a top-dollar transaction. The moment a potential buyer walks through the front door of a home in 2026, they are not just looking at the crown molding or the quartz countertops. They are subconsciously scanning for a narrative. In the world of high-stakes real estate, there is an old saying: buyers do not buy houses, they buy the life they imagine living inside them. When that house is the subject of a divorce, the narrative is often one of failure, conflict, and a desperate need for an exit. To a savvy buyer in the 2026 market, the scent of a divorce is like blood in the water for a shark. It signals that the sellers might be more focused on ending their relationship than on maximizing their profit, leading to potential outcomes where the final sale price is significantly lower than the market value. Let us look at the psychology of the lowball through a case study involving Christopher and Angela in suburban Virginia. They had been married for 15 years and were selling their $1.4 million colonial. Christopher had already moved out, taking his clothes, his favorite recliner, and the high-end espresso machine. Angela remained in the house with the kids. When the house was listed by a generalist agent, the photo showed a half-empty primary closet and a massive rectangular sunbleach mark on the hardwood floors where Christopher's rug used to be. There were empty hooks on the walls where wedding photos once hung. To a buyer looking through in 2026, these are not just empty spaces. They are financial opportunities. Imagine you are a buyer. You see the half-empty closet and you immediately think, one person is already gone. They are likely paying for 2 residences now. They are bleeding cash. They need this over with. This thought process leads directly to a lowball offer. In this historical trend, Christopher and Angela received 3 offers within the first 10 days, all of them at least $100,000 below the asking price. The buyers were not bidding on the house. They were bidding on the seller's desperation. A specialized divorce real estate agent prevents this through a process called the sanitization of the marital narrative. This is not about lying to the public. It is about presenting a neutral professional asset that protects the equity of the marital estate. Step 1 in this 2026 protocol is the visual neutralization. If one spouse has moved out, the specialist agent does not just leave the empty spaces. They bring in professional stagers to fill the home back to its full capacity. The primary closet is restaged with neutral, high-end clothing to imply a full, happy household. The sunbleach marks on the floor are covered with new neutral rugs. The goal is to make the house look like it is being sold because the owners are moving up or relocating for a career, not because they are uncoupling. Step 2 is what we call the single shoe theory. In 2026, buyers are more observant than ever. They look for the single pair of men's shoes by the door or the absence of a second toothbrush in the bathroom. A divorce specialist ensures that the staging includes what we call the illusion of cohabitation. This involves small, tactical placements, 2 coffee mugs on the counter, a balanced set of toiletries in the master bath, and a fully furnished office. This removes the psychological leverage from the buyer's mind. If the buyer cannot tell that a divorce is happening, they have to bid based on the home's actual value, not the owner's personal tragedy. The data from 2026 confirms that homes which undergo this level of narrative sanitization sell for an average of 7 to 9% more than those that appear as obvious divorce sales. On a $1 million home, that is $70,000 to $90,000 of equity saved for the family. This is why the depth of the specialist's role is so vital. They are managing the optics of a multi-million-dollar transaction. In a world where information is the most valuable currency, we must also talk about the 2026 listing language trap. In previous years, agents would often use phrases like motivated seller, or must sell now or bring all offers. In the current economic climate, these phrases are financial suicide. In 2026, AI-driven real estate platforms automatically flag these keywords and alert investors that a property is a distressed asset. A specialized agent uses neutralized marketing copy. Instead of focusing on the seller's motivation, the copy focuses on the property's unique value propositions, the 2026 energy-efficient upgrades, the proximity to new transit hubs, or the school district ratings. But what happens when the buyer's agent asks the dreaded question? Why are they selling? A generalist agent might feel a misplaced sense of honesty or a desire to build rapport and say, well, they are going through a tough time and just want to move on. That single sentence has just cost the sellers tens of thousands of dollars. A divorce real estate specialist is trained in the art of the non-disclosure response. They might say they have decided that this property no longer fits their long-term investment goals, or they are ready for their next chapter, and have authorized me to find a qualified buyer who appreciates the value of this home. Both statements are true, but neither gives away the tactical advantage. The 2026 cultural shift toward privacy also means that the specialist must manage the digital footprint of the sale. We are seeing more cases where buyers look up the sellers on social media before making an offer. If a spouse is posting about their new apartment or complaining about their ex-husband on a public forum, the sanitization of the house becomes irrelevant. Part of the specialized agent's role in 2026 is to provide a social media protocol for both clients, explaining that their online behavior has a direct correlation to the final number on their settlement check. This leads us to the most complex part of the 2026 transaction: the inspection stalemate. In a standard sale, if the inspector finds a $5,000 roof leak, the sellers usually split the cost or give a credit. In a divorce, every dollar spent on a repair is seen as a dollar taken from one person's pocket and given to the other. Christopher might refuse to pay for the roof because he is not the one who will be living under it for the next month. Angela might refuse because she thinks Christopher should have fixed it 3 years ago. The specialized agent manages this through the repair escrow strategy. Instead of arguing over who pays for the fix, the agent works with the attorneys to have the cost of the repair deducted from the total proceeds at the closing table before the final split happens. This ensures the deal stays alive and the house gets sold, rather than letting a $5,000 problem kill a $1.4 million sale. This is a step-by-step negotiation that requires the agent to be a master of conflict resolution and financial logistics. As we move through 2026, we are also seeing the rise of the divorce appraisal gap. Because markets are shifting so rapidly, an appraisal from 3 months ago during the initial filing might not match the market value today. A specialist agent knows how to present a rebuttal package to a low appraisal, providing the bank with the most recent comparable sales that justify the contract price. This is crucial because if the house doesn't appraise, the deal can fall through, and in a divorce, a failed sale often results in the parties being dragged back into a courtroom for a contempt hearing. The goal is to turn the tragedy of the divorce into a top-dollar transaction by treating the house as a high-performance asset. This requires a level of emotional detachment that only a specialized professional can provide. By the time the moving trucks arrive, the only thing the neighbors and the buyers should know is that a beautiful home has found a new owner. However, even if you manage the staging, the optics, and the inspections perfectly, there is one final boss that every 2026 homeowner must face: the Internal Revenue Service. As we move into the next phase of this deep dive, we are going to explore the massive tax implications of selling a home during a divorce. Did you know that the timing of your final decree could determine whether you owe $100,000 in capital gains tax or zero? In the next part, we are breaking down the Section 121 exclusion and why 2026 is a unique year for marital tax law. If you don't get the timing right, you might find that the IRS becomes your most expensive ex. We will also reveal the 2-year rule that catches thousands of sellers off guard every single year. Stay with us as we dive into the financial endgame. The financial endgame of a divorce often boils down to a single, high-stakes meeting with the Internal Revenue Service, whether you realize it or not. In the 2026 real estate landscape, where home values in many U.S. metropolitan areas have appreciated by 40 to 60% over the last 5 years, the capital gains tax is no longer a concern for just the ultra-wealthy. It is a middle-class crisis. To navigate this, we must look at the IRS Section 121 exclusion, a rule that was designed in a different economic era, but remains the primary shield for American homeowners. Understanding how this rule interacts with the 2026 divorce decree is the difference between keeping your equity and handing over a 6-figure check to the government. Imagine a scenario involving Thomas and Sarah in San Diego. They purchased their home in 2017 for $550,000. By 2026, the market has pushed that value to $1.2 million. On paper, they are sitting on $650,000 of capital gain. Under Section 121, if they sell the home while still legally married and filing a joint tax return, they can exclude up to $500,000 of that gain from taxation. This leaves them with only $150,000 in taxable gain, which, at a 15 or 20% capital gains rate plus state taxes, is a manageable hit. However, let us look at the potential outcomes if they rush the divorce decree before the sale. Once the clock strikes midnight on their marriage and they become single filers, that $500,000 exclusion is instantly sliced in half to $250,000 per person. If Sarah stays in the house and sells it a year after the divorce is finalized, she can only use her $250,000 exclusion. The remaining $400,000 of profit becomes taxable income. In the 2026 tax environment, this could result in a tax bill exceeding $100,000. This is what we call the divorce tax penalty, and it catches thousands of homeowners off guard every year because they prioritize the emotional end of the marriage over the fiscal timing of the asset liquidation. The specialized divorce real estate agent acts as a tactical advisor in this situation. working alongside tax professionals to determine the optimal sequence of events. Step 1 in this 2026 tax protocol is the basis reconstruction. Most homeowners in 2026 have no idea that their cost basis is not just what they paid for the house. It includes all capital improvements made over the years. A specialized agent provides the couple with a detailed checklist to hunt for receipts from the 2022 kitchen remodel, the 2024 solar panel installation, and the 2025 smart roof replacement. Every dollar added to the basis is a dollar that cannot be taxed as profit. In the case of Thomas and Sarah, if they can prove $100,000 in improvements, their taxable gain drops from $150,000 to $50,000 on a joint return. Step 2 is the 2-year rule audit. To qualify for the Section 121 exclusion, you must have owned and lived in the home as your principal residence for at least 2 out of the last 5 years leading up to the sale. This is where the cultural shift of the outspouse becomes a massive tax liability. In 2026, many divorces take 2 to 3 years to finalize due to court backlogs. If Thomas moves out the day they separate and the house doesn't sell for 3.5 years, he may technically lose his ability to claim the exclusion because he hasn't lived there for 2 of the last 5 years. However, there is a specialized legal loophole within the IRS code specifically for divorce, known as the 121D(3) provision. This rule states that if a person is granted use of the property under a divorce or separation instrument, the other spouse's use of the property is imputed to the outspouse. In plain English, if the divorce papers are drafted correctly by a specialist who understands real estate law, Thomas can still claim his $250,000 exclusion even if he hasn't stepped foot in the house for years, as long as Sarah was living there under a court order. A generalist real estate agent often has no idea this rule exists, potentially leading to a situation where they tell a client to sell the house quickly and sacrifice their negotiating power, when they could have waited for a better market. Step 3 is the filing status strategy. In 2026, the decision to file as married filing jointly for one last year or married filing separately is a high-stakes calculation. While a joint return offers the $500,000 exclusion, it also makes both parties jointly and severally liable for any errors or audits on that return. If Sarah doesn't trust Thomas's business accounting, she might refuse to sign a joint return, effectively forcing them into the lower $250,000 exclusion brackets. The divorce real estate specialist coordinates with the CPA to present the net gain numbers to both parties, showing them exactly how much more money they will each receive if they can cooperate for one final tax season. Historical trends in 2026 show that the timing of the sale is also influenced by the net investment income tax, NIIT. An additional 3.8% tax that can apply if the gain from the home sale pushes the individual's income over certain thresholds. For a high-earning couple in a tech hub like Seattle or Austin, the sale of the family home can trigger a cascade of secondary taxes that eat away at the settlement. The specialized agent monitors these thresholds, sometimes advising the couple to delay the closing by just a few days into the next tax year to minimize the total hit. We must also consider the 2026 trend of the house for pension swap. This is a common arrangement where one spouse keeps the house, and the other keeps the retirement accounts of equal value. While this seems fair on day one, it is often a tax trap. The house is an after-tax asset with a built-in tax liability when it eventually sells. The 401k is a pre-tax asset where every dollar withdrawn will be taxed as ordinary income in the future. A specialized agent helps the parties visualize the true, tax-adjusted value of the home, so they aren't trading a $1 million house for a $1 million retirement account that is actually only worth $700,000 after Uncle Sam takes his cut. But what happens if the house isn't sold? What if the plan was to keep the home, but a sudden shift in 2026 employment trends or a spike in local property taxes makes it impossible for the staying spouse to hold on? We are seeing a historical trend of the post-divorce forced sale. This occurs when a spouse wins the house in the settlement but realizes 6 months later they cannot afford the maintenance and taxes. Because they are now a single filer, they are hit with the maximum tax penalty and have lost the protection of the joint exclusion. This leads us to the most dangerous phase of the process, the logistical collapse. Even if you get the taxes right and the legal documents signed, the actual physical act of uncoupling a household in 2026 is where the most damage is done to the property's value. From the 2026 labor shortages in the moving industry to the vandalism of neglect that occurs when a spouse stops caring for a home they are about to lose, the final transition is a minefield. In the next part, we are going to dive into the logistics of the exit, We will explore why the final walkthrough in a 2026 divorce sale is the most volatile hour in the entire transaction. We will reveal the 3 things that disappearing spouses take from the house that can trigger a lawsuit, and how a specialized agent uses a personal property protocol to ensure that the fixtures stay put and the sale stays on track. You will not believe what people consider to be personal property when emotions are high. Stay with us as we move toward the physical reality of the move-out. The physical exit from a marital home is the moment where the abstract legalities of a divorce decree collide with the messy, tangible reality of a life being dismantled. In 2026, the logistics of moving out have become a primary source of post-closing litigation. It is no longer just about who gets the sofa. It is about the definition of a fixture in a high-tech world and the psychological phenomenon of the parting gift, where a disgruntled spouse leaves the property in a state that triggers a breach of contract. Consider a case study involving Kevin and Maria in Chicago. They owned a luxury penthouse valued at $2.4 million. The sale was finalized, the buyers were ready, and the closing was set for a Friday. On Thursday night, Kevin, who felt he had been slighted in the overall asset division, moved out. In his mind, he was only taking what he paid for. He removed the custom-designed smart chandeliers from the dining room, the high-end Nest thermostats, the Ring doorbell, and even the wall-mounted charging station for his electric vehicle. When the buyers arrived for their final walkthrough on Friday morning, they didn't find a turnkey luxury home. They found a construction zone with exposed wires hanging from the ceiling and holes in the drywall. This scenario represents the fixture fallacy that plagues 2026 real estate. Traditionally, a fixture is anything attached to the property with the intent that it becomes part of the real estate. However, in our current cultural shift toward modular smart homes, the line has blurred. Is a magnetic spice rack a fixture? Is a plug-in smart hub that controls the entire home's irrigation system personal property? For Kevin, these were gadgets. For the buyers, they were integral components of the home they purchased. Because the generalist agent involved had not used a personal property protocol, the closing was delayed by 3 weeks, while the attorneys argued over the definition of integrated technology. The potential outcomes included a $50,000 escrow holdback and a lawsuit for property damage. A specialized divorce real estate agent in 2026 prevents this logistical collapse through a 3-step asset inventory framework. Step 1 is the pre-listing videography. Before the home even hits the market, the specialist walks through every room with a high-resolution camera, documenting the presence of every appliance, light fixture, and smart device. This video is then shared with both spouses and their attorneys. If Maria wants to take the antique mirror in the entryway, it is documented as an exclusion in the listing agreement from day 1. This eliminates the element of surprise that often leads to emotional outbursts during the final week of the sale. Step 2 is the tagging protocol. In high-conflict 2026 divorces, the specialist will literally place colored stickers on the bottom of items. Blue means it stays with the house, red means it goes with spouse A, and yellow means it goes with spouse B. While this may seem elementary, in the heat of a move-out, it provides a visual boundary that prevents accidental or intentional theft of marital assets. Historical trends show that when clear boundaries are set, the likelihood of a successful final walkthrough increases by nearly 60%. Step 3 is the vendor coordination. In 2026, the United States is facing a persistent labor shortage in the moving and storage industry. We have seen case studies where a spouse intended to move out by the closing date, but their moving company canceled 24 hours prior. In a standard sale, the buyer might offer a 1-day extension. In a divorce sale, the buyer is often already nervous and might see this as a sign of an uncooperative seller, leading them to threaten to cancel the contract and keep the earnest money deposit. A divorce specialist maintains a curated list of emergency movers and last-mile storage solutions to ensure that the house is empty and broom-clean by the deadline, no matter what logistical hurdles arise. We must also address the vandalism of neglect. This is a subtle but devastating 2026 trend. When a spouse knows they are losing their home, their motivation to maintain it evaporates. We see this frequently with the outspouse who is responsible for the technical maintenance of the home. Imagine if Jason moves out and, out of spite or simple apathy, stops paying the subscription for the smart leak detection system. A week later, a pipe bursts in the upstairs bathroom. Because the system was deactivated, the water runs for 3 days, causing $80,000 in damage. In 2026, the specialized agent implements a maintenance escrow or a professional management rider. This ensures that a third-party service is paid out of the marital funds to mow the lawn, clean the pool, and monitor the home systems until the day of closing. This is not just a convenience. It is an insurance policy for the equity. If a buyer sees a yellowing lawn or a green pool during a showing, they immediately subtract $20,000 from their offer price, assuming that if the sellers didn't care for the lawn, they certainly didn't care for the roof or the HVAC system. The final walkthrough in a 2026 divorce sale is often the most volatile 60 minutes of the entire year-long process. It is the moment of no return. A specialized agent attends the walkthrough personally, often arriving an hour early to ensure that no parting messages have been left behind. We have seen historical trends where a spouse writes their feelings about the divorce on the inside of the kitchen cabinets or leaves piles of trash in the garage as a final act of defiance. The specialist agent has a cleaning crew on standby to sanitize the home one last time, ensuring the buyer's final impression is one of peace and professionalism. This logistical precision is also vital for the 2026 tax records we discussed in the previous part. If Kevin took the EV charger, that is not just a missing fixture. It is a change in the home's basis and value. The agent must ensure that the final closing disclosure reflects the actual state of the property to prevent future IRS audits or buyer claims of fraud. Beyond the physical walls, however, there is a hidden infrastructure that is being rebuilt in the background. As the moving trucks pull away, both spouses are facing a new reality: the total destruction and necessary reconstruction of their financial identities. In 2026, the sale of the marital home is the primary event that triggers a massive shift in a person's credit capacity and future buying power. But how do you buy your next home when your credit score was just dragged through a 2-year legal battle? How do you qualify for a mortgage when your income is now split by alimony and child support payments? In the next part, we are going to explore the post-divorce credit rebuild. We will reveal the 2026 lending secrets that allow you to use your divorce settlement as qualifying income, and how to protect your score during the most volatile financial transition of your life. We will also dive into the right-to-rent trend where ex-spouses are becoming each other's landlords to preserve their interest rates. The next chapter is about your life after the house is gone. Stay with us. The moment the closing documents are signed and the keys are handed over, a new and arguably more complex chapter of the American financial story begins. In the landscape of 2026, the sale of the marital home is not just an exit. It is a total reset of an individual's financial identity. For many, this transition is marked by a phenomenon known as credit contagion. During the high-conflict phase of a divorce, it is common for joint accounts to be neglected, for credit card balances to spike as legal fees mount, and for mortgage payments to be made late as a form of tactical leverage, or simply due to the chaos of maintaining 2 households on one income. By the time the house is sold, the individuals involved often find that their credit scores have plummeted by 100 to 150 points. In the 2026 lending environment, where credit requirements have tightened in response to fluctuating interest rates, a score in the low 600s is a significant barrier to re-entry into the housing market. Historical trends indicate that the first 6 months post-divorce are critical for what we call credit triage. The specialized divorce real estate agent often collaborates with credit restoration experts to guide clients through a step-by-step recovery process. Imagine a scenario involving Samuel in Atlanta. After the sale of his family home in 2026, Samuel had $150,000 in cash from his share of the equity, but his credit score was 610. He wanted to buy a $400,000 condo to be near his children, but because of his score and the fact that he was now a single filer, his debt-to-income ratio looked catastrophic to traditional lenders. Samuel represents a growing demographic of the 2026 new singles who are cash-rich but credit-poor. Step 1 in Samuel's recovery was the formal severance of financial ties. In 2026, simply having a divorce decree is not enough for most creditors. Samuel had to manually contact every joint account holder to ensure his name was removed or the account was closed. A common pitfall in 2026 is the zombie joint account, a credit card with a zero balance that neither spouse uses, which remains open. If the ex-spouse suddenly uses that card to fund a vacation a year later and fails to pay, it can drag the other person's score back down. Step 2 is the documentation of support. This is where the 2026 mortgage guidelines become incredibly technical. If Samuel were receiving alimony or child support, he would need to prove what is known as continuity of income. Under 2026 historical trends, most lenders require proof that the support has been received consistently for at least 6 months, and is legally mandated to continue for at least 3 years from the date of the new mortgage application. If the marital settlement agreement was drafted loosely, for example, saying support ends when a child turns 18, and that child is currently 16, that income cannot be used to qualify for a 30-year mortgage. The specialized agent ensures that the legal documents are written with these specific 2026 underwriting requirements in mind. This brings us to one of the most radical cultural shifts of 2026, the right to rent movement among ex-spouses. Because interest rates on new mortgages in 2026 remain significantly higher than the 3% rates of the early 2020s, many couples are choosing to avoid a traditional sale altogether. Instead, they enter into a post-marital asset management agreement. In this scenario, one spouse stays in the house and pays the other spouse rent. Imagine Chloe and Brian in Seattle. They have a 2.75% mortgage. If they sell, they lose that rate forever. Instead, they agree that Chloe will stay in the house for 5 years until their youngest child finishes middle school. Brian moves out but remains on the title and the mortgage. Chloe pays Brian a monthly rent that covers the mortgage, taxes, and insurance, plus a small premium. Brian then uses this recorded rental income to help him qualify for his own separate residence. In 2026, this is legally known as an arm's-length rental agreement between related parties. To make this work with a lender, the couple must treat it as a formal business transaction. They must have a written lease, and the rent must be paid via a traceable method. No cash or informal transfers. Historical trends show that when ex-spouses act as landlord and tenant, they can preserve their low-interest debt while still allowing both parties to move forward. However, this requires a level of trust and emotional maturity that is rare in high-conflict cases. If Chloe stops paying the rent, Brian's credit is at risk, and he may be forced to file a petition action to compel a sale, a legal process that in 2026 can cost upwards of $25,000 in attorney fees. Step 3 of the post-divorce transition is the equity deployment strategy. In 2026, we are seeing a shift away from the 20% down payment. Many divorcees are opting for smaller down payments on their next purchase, choosing instead to keep their equity in high-yield liquid accounts as an emergency fund. This is a response to the 2026 volatility in the job market. A specialized agent helps the client calculate the opportunity cost of their equity. Is it better to put $100,000 down to lower a monthly payment by $600, or to keep that $100,000 in a 2026 money market account yielding 5%? Furthermore, we must address the 2026 reality of the lifestyle downsize. The cultural expectation that each spouse should immediately buy a home comparable to the marital home is fading. We are seeing an explosion in the luxury rental market for divorcees who are intentionally waiting for a specific market cycle to buy again. These individuals are using their house sale proceeds to fund a 2-year lease in a high-amenity building, giving them the time to rebuild their credit, stabilize their income, and wait for potential outcomes where interest rates might soften. However, the shadow of the old marriage often lingers in the form of the contingent liability. In 2026, if you are still on the mortgage of the home your ex-spouse is living in, even if they are the one paying it, that debt is counted against you 100% by most lenders unless you can provide 12 months of canceled checks showing the ex-spouse made the payments from their own separate account. This single rule is the primary reason why the clean break sale remains the gold standard for those who want to buy again immediately. As we look at the survivors of the 2026 real estate divorce wars, a clear pattern emerges. Those who succeed are not the ones who fought the hardest, but those who planned the most. They treated their home not as a theater for their emotions, but as a piece of machinery that needed to be decommissioned and salvaged with surgical precision. They understood that every angry email, every delayed signature, and every hidden lien was a direct tax on their future self. The evolution of the divorce real estate agent into a holistic transition manager is a direct response to this complexity. In 2026, you don't just need a person to put a sign in the yard. You need a person who understands the intersection of family law, federal tax codes, digital forensics, and mortgage underwriting. As we approach the conclusion of this masterclass, we have covered the legal landmines, the digital warfare, the tax traps, and the credit rebuild. But there is one final piece of the puzzle that ties everything together. It is the blueprint for the future. In the final part of this series, we are going to provide the ultimate 2026 divorce real estate checklist. We will reveal the one question you must ask your attorney before you list your home, and the one mistake that even the smartest homeowners make in the final 48 hours of their marriage. We will also look at how AI and blockchain are starting to change the way divorce settlements are recorded, potentially making the high-conflict sale a thing of the past. Stay with us for the final chapter of cultural shifts and the divorce real estate agent in America. We have reached the culmination of the 2026 Divorce Real Estate Masterclass, and it is here that we must synthesize every legal, financial, and digital strategy into a singular blueprint for the future. In the current American landscape, the difference between a successful uncoupling and a decade-long financial recovery period is the move from a reactive stance to a proactive, specialist-led strategy. The 2026 market does not forgive the unprepared. We are seeing a historical trend where the most successful transitions are those that treat the home not as a theater for emotional closure, but as a decommissioned asset requiring a highly technical exit protocol. The first and most critical component of this blueprint is the one question you must ask your attorney before a single photo is taken of your home. Most homeowners in 2026 assume that if their lawyer handles the divorce, the real estate will naturally follow. However, the question you must ask is this: is the language in my court order regarding the sale of the house descriptive or prescriptive? In 2026, a descriptive order might say that the parties agree to sell the home and split the proceeds. This is a recipe for a multi-year stalemate. A prescriptive order, which is the gold standard for the 2026 divorce real estate specialist, specifies the exact listing date, the name of the neutral agent, the mandatory price reduction schedule if no offers are received within 21 days, and the exact protocol for accepting an offer within 5% of the market valuation. Consider the case study of Brandon and Samantha in Denver. Their 2026 divorce decree was descriptive. It simply stated they would sell their $900,000 home. Brandon, wanting to move on, accepted an offer for $880,000. Samantha, feeling that the market was rising, refused to sign the contract. Because the order lacked prescriptive language, they spent 18 months and $40,000 in additional legal fees fighting over a $20,000 price difference. If they had asked their attorney the one question and secured a prescriptive order, the house would have sold in 30 days, and they would have each walked away with significantly more equity. The second component of the 2026 blueprint is the ultimate divorce real estate checklist. This is a step-by-step framework that every homeowner should demand from their professional team. Step 1 is the forensic title and lien audit. In 2026, we are seeing a massive surge in solar liens and hero loans that were taken out by one spouse without the other's full understanding. These are not standard mortgages. They are often tied to the property tax bill or recorded as a UC1 filing. A specialized agent identifies these on day 1, before they can blow up a sale 2 days before closing. Step 2 is the occupancy and maintenance stipulation. In 2026, where labor for home repairs is at an all-time high, you must decide who is responsible for the $500 repair. If the water heater breaks while the wife is living in the home but the husband is paying the mortgage, who pays the plumber? The checklist requires a pre-funded repair escrow account, usually $5,000, held by the listing agent's brokerage or a neutral third party, to handle emergency repairs without requiring a negotiation between ex-spouses. Step 3 is the neutrality staging and digital sanitization. As we discussed in earlier parts, this involves the physical removal of emotional artifacts and the resetting of the smart home hub. In 2026, a house that looks like a happy home sells for more than a house that looks like a battlefield. This checklist ensures that the narrative presented to the buyer is one of value and stability. Step 4 is the mortgage novation feasibility study. Before you decide to sell, you must determine if the remaining spouse can legally and financially assume the 3% mortgage from 2021. In 2026, this is the single most important financial decision a divorcing individual will make. The checklist requires a formal sit-down with a divorce lending professional to review the debt-to-income ratio based solely on the staying spouse's post-divorce income. The third major pillar of our blueprint is avoiding the final 48-hour mistake, often called the midnight raid. In 2026, with the prevalence of smart home technology, the final 2 days before closing are the highest risk for asset dissipation. Imagine a scenario in Houston where Michael, on his final night in the house, decided to take the smart home hub, the high-end security cameras, and the integrated built-in speakers that were technically fixtures. He believed these were his personal property because he had installed them. The buyers, upon seeing the damage to the drywall and the missing technology during the final walkthrough, refused to sign the closing documents. Michael was then sued not only for the cost of the items but for the buyer's daily carrying costs and the loss of their interest rate lock. The lesson of 2026 is simple. If it is attached to the house, leave it alone. The specialized agent provides a fixture list that both parties must sign 48 hours before move-out to prevent this outcome. Looking toward the horizon, the cultural shift in 2026 is moving toward the use of blockchain and AI in divorce settlements. We are seeing the early adoption of smart contracts for equity distribution. Instead of waiting for a title company to cut a check that might be delayed by a bank hold, the 2026 specialist can utilize a blockchain-based settlement where the proceeds are instantly and transparently distributed, according to the court-ordered percentages the moment the deed is recorded. This eliminates the risk of one spouse attempting to intercept the funds. Furthermore, AI-driven objective valuations are becoming the court standard for resolving the appraisal gap. Instead of two human appraisers arguing over their personal opinions of the market, 2026 judges are increasingly relying on aggregate data models that analyze thousands of data points, from local school ratings to the number of Google searches for a specific neighborhood, to provide a neutral, non-biased valuation. This is a historical trend toward removing the human element from the valuation process to reduce conflict and litigation. The rise of the divorce real estate specialist is not just a trend, it is a permanent evolution of the American real estate industry. The generalist agent of the past, who relied on relationships and local knowledge, is being replaced by a professional who acts as a specialized fiduciary. In 2026, your home is likely your largest investment, your children's stability, and your primary retirement fund. Treating its sale as anything less than a highly technical, legally charged transaction is a risk that the modern economy no longer allows you to take. As we conclude this deep dive, remember that the goal of this masterclass was to move you from a state of chaos to a state of certainty. By understanding the legal triggers, the tax implications, and the digital complexities of 2026, you are now equipped to navigate one of life's most difficult transitions with your equity and your dignity intact. The potential outcomes for those who apply these strategies include a faster sale, a higher price, and a cleaner break from the past. Historical trends show that the most successful individuals in 2026 are those who recognize that while a marriage may end, their financial future is just beginning. Thank you for joining us for this masterclass on cultural shifts and the divorce real estate agent in America. Your next chapter starts now, and with the right blueprint, it can be your best one yet.